Explain what spoken word poetry is to someone who has never heard of it.
Spoken word poetry is essentially poetry that is performed. For lack of a better, for lack of a perhaps more eloquent definition and explanation, it is simply the emotive language of poetry performed vocally rather than written down. And when it's performed vocally, obviously, then it takes on, it needs to take on other attributes. So it needs to factor in rhythm, timing, alliteration, even. These are some of the things that need to occur when something is transported from the two-dimensional piece of paper to the 3 or 4D world that we live in. So essentially, again, spoken word, for anyone who hasn't heard it, is simply poetry that is spoken and performed.
What advice would you provide to someone interested in becoming a spoken word artist?
The advice that I would give to someone who is silly enough to want to become a spoken word artist, and I say silly jokingly, would be to write whenever the spirit strikes them. I think a lot of writers tend to sit down and say, "I'm going to now write," and that's a rather arduous task. It's rather difficult to just sit down and write. So that blank page is rather threatening, rather ominous. So I would say, first and foremost, right when you're on the bus, when you're walking down the street, when you're sitting watching TV, just jot little things down that come to you, phrases, words, ideas. Then when you sit down, you don't have this blank page staring at you going, "Oh, you can't write anything. It's so hard to write." You can just put a couple of things down that you've been thinking about throughout the day and throughout the week, and then let your mind run away with those ideas and give yourself that space. Number two, I would say you need to listen, and listen. Everybody who speaks is performing spoken word. It's in the pauses. It's in the staccato-ness. It's in the rhythm of their words. Everybody does it. And if you listen in and tune in, you can hear spoken word all day long. And then you can find what rhythms and what pauses and what incantations and what rhythms are used when a person is upset or when a person is rather happy. And you can begin to channel those. Third thing that I would say is write. So right when you get a chance, listen to a lot of the spoken word that's going on around you every day, and then write. Those are the pieces of advice I would give to someone who wants to be a spoken word artist.
How do you come up with new ideas for your rap?
There's not just one way, but the majority of ideas, original ideas I come up with for my spoken word pieces actually comes from the young people I work with. Speaking to them, hearing from them, learning from them often makes me think about myself. How did I deal with that when I was younger? Did I deal with that when I was younger? How did I deal with that when I was younger? What was some of the and very often a lot of my writing comes from that kind of engagement with young people and introspection and self-assessment brings me to a lot of my ideas with regards to spoken word, things that I've thought, things that I've experienced, things that I've felt, challenges I've faced, challenges I haven't faced, people who I know have faced challenges, and what have they been? Have they been funny? Have they been sad? Have they been dramatic? Have they been action filled? And very often it's a bit of all of them. So I would say I take my main inspiration from my engagement with young people and self-assessment, reflecting on my own life.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
3 words? This is really funny because as a native New Yorker about 15 years ago, I would have had no problem answering this question. I'm articulate. I'm the charisma. But now I've been in England so long, I feel this is a bit. Want me to speak about myself and say, oh goodness. Okay, 3 words to describe myself. I would hope to say that I am observant, I would like to say, I'm funny. Change funny, cut funny, silly. Observant, silly, humble. Person who says they're humble is like the person who says my weakness is being perfect. I'm a perfectionist. Okay, no, it's got to be okay. It's got to be silly. It's got to be observant, and if only because I want to be, I would say caring. I do care. I do care. I do care. If only because I know that in caring, it makes it much easier, much more likely that someone will care for me. So yeah, caring, observant, and silly. Chandni, you pulled that out of me. That's amazing. You grilled me there. You just pulled that out of me. You're good at this.
What was your dream job when you were younger?
When I was younger, I had a number of dream jobs. I first wanted to be an exploring, adventuring archaeologist. Has nothing to do with the fact that I grew up watching Indiana Jones movies. Nothing at all. I then wanted to be an astronaut. Then I decided being an astronomer sounded way more cool than being an astronaut. Like anybody can be an astronaut. Like if you can be really physical, but if you have to be really, really smart to be an astronomer, wasn't smart enough. So then I decided I wanted to be a lawyer because I enjoyed arguing until I realized that's kind of not what it's actually about at all. So then I thought, hey, you know what? I've got it. I'll be an American football player. I played American football in high school, and I was actually quite good at it. I had a scholarship to university to play. But had a major knee injury, so that didn't work out. So I figured, you know what? I'm good with people. I'm good with young people. Let me teach. So I actually taught high school, secondary school for about 15 years back in the States. I actually never thought of myself as being a performer growing up. I never imagined that this is what I would be. And I've had a band, and I've toured, and been on albums, and I've been on TV, and I've been in front of tens of thousands of people. And I never imagined that for me. There were so many other things and so many other interests that I had. And I guess what I've realized, and now that I'm here looking back, is that all of the, you talked about what things inspire me to write. It's things like this, thinking back and going, you know what? I want to be Indiana Jones. Let's write an Indiana Jones too. So I think finding out that being a performer / writer who could write about being all of these different things was what led me to where I am. But I couldn't have gotten here without wanting to be those other things, wanting to answer other questions, wanting to solve other problems in life. So I do a lot of work with at-risk young people, and working with a particular group of boys who consistently want to talk about knives and guns, stomping out people and fighting. And we've often got into the discussion about how your greatest weapon is your mind, your strongest muscle is your mind. It's unstoppable. So I've been writing a little something to those ends. And I won't do the whole thing, but I'll give you a bit of it. And it starts with, because look, I'll be out here, stood up all on my lonely, preaching that get a gun, 1 foot up on my soapbox. But listen, what I mean is, since back when I was younger, out on the road with me, stabbing and shooting for real, though, it had my uncle on some homeschooling. He was old Ben Kenobi in the system that he done been through. It got him back up on his Obi once again. With all that knowledge and ammunition, your mind's a weapon that he be talking to sound like nephew. Need to learn to use the force like Luke. Listen. And it continues on with the uncle explaining to him the many different types of guns and the way that you would use that gun, but it's all metaphorical. The idea that your thoughts and knowledge is ammunition and your mind is a weapon. All right. And that, so for instance, you might say, metaphorically speaking, apocalypto, run red in the streets, blood red through the jungle, crouch low, lift the blowgun, thoughts dart, block the sun out. There's not an object that's immovable. When your mind's thinking, it'll stop a rhino. So it's that kind of idea of that imagery of, you don't need a gun, you don't need a knife to move mountains. All you need is your mind. You can create worlds.